Welcome to the June 26, 2017 meeting of the Marquette City Commission. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Would you please rise with me and say the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
City Clerk, could we have the roll call, please?
Thank you, Your Honor. Commissioner Cambenzi? Here. Commissioner Conley?
Here.
Commissioner Frazier?
Here.
Commissioner Plord?
Here.
Commissioner Reynolds?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Baldini?
Here.
And Mayor Campana.
Here. In front of us, we have the agenda. Do you have any additions? Commissioner Conley.
Mayor, I would like to add to the agenda a new business item, purchase of property from John Blackener, an amendment.
Would there be a second, Commissioner Mayor Pro Tem Baldini?
Support.
Okay, we are going to add that as item 9 under new business. Now, we need to approve the agenda as amended. Do we have a motion? Commissioner Conley,
I move that we approve the agenda as amended.
is there a second? Commissioner Frazier,
Support.
all those in favor, please say yes.
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 Opposed? That passes 7-0. Announcements, I have none tonight. We move to public hearings. We have 2 public hearings tonight. First public hearing is ordinance number 654, which is repealing Chapter 26, Section 19, and Section 20 of the Marquette City Code, and adopting a new Chapter 26, Section 19, and Section 20. City Clerk, could you give us the background on that, please?
Thank you, sir. In 1997, the NFPA 101 Life Safety Code was adopted by the city to govern building construction, protection, and occupancy features to minimize dangers to life safety. However, this code is not a general fire code and does not cover the requirements necessary to establish a reasonable level of fire and life safety and property protection from the hazards created by fire, explosion, and dangerous conditions. Past practice has been to use the NFPA 1 fire code, but it has not been formally adopted. This has resulted in suboptimal and potentially hazardous conditions within the city in regards to firefighting, water supply, and fire apparatus access. In the same regard, the ICC International Property Maintenance Code was not formally adopted at that time. The IPMC is currently adopted as part of the Rental Fire Safety Code. It is used by the zoning department to regulate the exterior of buildings and is used in practice by the fire inspector to regulate commercial structures. As with the NFPA codes, this needs to be formally adopted. Fiscal effect none. Recommendation, adopt ordinance number 654, which repeals Chapter 26, Section 19, and Section 20 of the Marquette City Code in entirety, and adopts a new Chapter 26, Section 19, and Section 20. Alternatives as determined by the Commission.
Okay, before we go any further, we do have the Fire Chief, Ian Davis, here. Ian, is there anything you care to add, or are you okay with this? Just clarification, maybe, you know, real language.
Is this working? Yeah. Sorry. Oh, okay. This won't change anything for anybody in the city. We've already been going by these codes for the last 20 years. Unfortunately, the way it was adopted, some of the codes weren't legally adopted. So all we're doing is basically a cleanup on the way the ordinance is written. It isn't going to change the way we've done it. We do things. We've been doing it the same way for 20 years. It just, we found a problem with the way it was written back in 1997.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we're going to open this public hearing. If any citizen wishes to address the commission on this particular ordinance, you've got 3 minutes in the front here. We need name, local address, city or township. Does anybody wish to address the commission at this point?
Good evening, Commissioners. L.R. Swadley, 135 Hidden Springs in Marquette, community developer, as you know. I'm also here as the president of the Home Builders Association of Michigan. We represent 4,800 companies in Michigan. We're the voice of housing and all things development, quite honestly. And I believe that this is more complicated than is being presented to you. The Marquette City Fire Marshal is recommending the City Commission adopt an NFPA 1 fire code in place of the current NFPA 101 life safety code adopted and used by the city. There are a number of reasons the City Commission should continue to use the 101 life safety code, which it has used for many years. I'm going to give you a copy right out of the, directly from the National Fire Protection. Give it to the clerk. Clerk, please. This is background information for you on NFPA 101. It is very comprehensive, and it covers everything that you need to cover for protect life safety and welfare in the community. And it's by way of background, the Michigan Statewide Construction Code is by statute to include rules governing the construction, use, and occupation of buildings and structure, including safety from fire. We have a comprehensive statewide building code. All right, it works great. It's capably administered by local county officials. The legislature did not intend to create a system where separate fire codes could be adopted to replace or supersede the statewide code. You know, for example, there are explicit requirements that are Michigan specific with respect to when fire sprinklers must be installed and in what structures. The decisions with respect to these provisions were intended to control statewide and not be supplanted by the adoption of variant code allowing local officials to try to overrule those decisions and replace statewide authority or create conflicts between the statewide code and local decisions. The life safety code is adopted in Marquette is directly concerned with danger to life from fire. The building code addresses those construction, protection, and occupancy features necessary to minimize danger from life and effects of fire, including smoke, heat, and toxic gases created during a fire. The scope of NFPA 1 is much broader and includes building inspections, and in many ways can be used to supersede the building code or go around the building code. I would the point I'd like to make is that you have a code right now that has been taking care of it, and there is no need to change to 101. Our experts in Lansing can only determine the only real differences that could be done here from relate to this is to determine that in his interest that a safety issue
Mr.
existed.
Swadley, your time is up.
Well, it's unfortunate because this is comprehensive, and you know, I
Yeah.
would say you guys suggested you table this until you get more background information. It's much more far-reaching than is being presented here tonight.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mark Kerr, and I live at 200 South 4th Street. And
In
frankly,
Marquette. Marquette.
Marquette, yes. And to be honest, we all know a lot of this changes because of our Rippling River Resort. That NFPA 1 would have forced us into building 2,000 plus feet of water main, okay? We volunteered to bore in a 6-inch water line, but no, it had to be 8-inch ductile iron. And we went round and round, and we're not able to come up with compromises. The NFPA 1 code does not match well with the state construction code of the Hill-Durasic Act. We even have one of the letters from the Michigan Department of Consumer Industry Services here that even states how those don't go together very well. So I'm going to give this over to the secretary. You'll even see where there's already conflicts. If you wind up, I want you to make sure you take a look at the back paragraph. And there's direct conflicts with just saying you have to add fire hydrants. You have to add water mains. So I'm going to go ahead and add this to Kyle. Again, if you'll please just read through this packet okay? A lot of it just has definitions of what 101 does, but it has some great explanations. This was put together by the Home Builders Association of Michigan and a lot of our legal team that's down there, and it gives you a lot of good background information. This is not something to take lightly. This is not a minor change to your ordinances. This is giving them a lot of power to walk into our homes and make decisions, or our developments, and just make decisions that are not going. They do all of our, but this NFPA 1 starts to tell them what they can do on the inside of the buildings, and that's not what we want in this community. When I first moved here in the 90s, this was an area, it was so easy to come in and be an entrepreneur and get things started. And I would want you just to strongly step back, look at this if you were trying to set up your own business and say, do we need to add more codes over more codes over more codes? That, frankly, we're just going to have more battles over. You know, we have NFPA 101 is very straightforward. You can look through the code book. You can match that. It was designed to match into our state construction code, so they all meld together very well, and there's no major conflicts. Just step back, take some time, do some research. You know, I'm sure the fire chief can do a little bit of research as well. Your legal team can do a little bit of research, but we need to make sure this stuff is good for Marquette, and NFPA 1 is not good for Marquette. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Yerma Lankin, 8 Marquette Drive here in the city of Marquette. It appears the life safety code is a real conflict. Our Home Builder Association, which I've been a member for the past 43 years and been building in this area for the past 43 also, I would really strongly urge that you, the authority-making body, would get together with us, our home builders attorneys. They don't like this at all, and get our side of that are doing this every day, day in and day out. You're just coming in here, somebody says it's a good idea. It really is not a good idea. It's affecting the entire industry that we love and dearly pursue in our community. And so we have an incredible amount of brain power with the Home Builders Association. We have a local home builders president that's also the president of our state association. So please take advantage of this information, and rather than just rubber stamping stuff, please do a work session with Mr. Swadley and some of the other people through our Home Builders Association and get more of the facts before you make the decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone else wish to address the commission on this item? Anyone else? Seeing none, we're going to close this public hearing. Commissioners, do we have a motion? Do we have a motion? Commissioner Reynolds,
I move to suspend the rules for discussion.
is there a second? Commissioner Baldini,
Support.
all in favor, say yes.
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 Opposed? Okay, it carries. Commissioner Reynolds?
Well, generally, as they were speaking, when I read through this, I didn't realize it'd be a controversy, but I also saw Ian taking a lot of notes, so I'd really like to hear Ian's thoughts as our speakers were talking about this issue.
The main thing that was brought up was the Steele DeRosset single state building code. And basically what that says, it's a state law that says that no other code can supersede the Michigan building code. This does not do that. We can't, by state law, go above and beyond anything over the Michigan state building code. If the Michigan state building code does not speak to a subject, the NFPA codes can regulate at that point. You know, our intention isn't to change the way we're doing things. We've been going by these codes for 20 years. Nothing is going to change. Mr. Kern's assumption that this has something to do with him is incorrect. We identified this change to this ordinance well before that came up. It did have something to do with this at that time. Basically, we're not a rural firefighting agency. We're not a rural community. We don't have tankers to be able to come and put out fires. We rely on the city's water system and hydrants to put out fires. Where he put his development in, there weren't hydrants close enough. And Obviously, he didn't want to put the expense in to put them in. That's where this came up afterwards. We did identify this beforehand. Unfortunately, it didn't get corrected in time. And basically, we either need hydrants or we need tankers. So, you know, one solution is to turn us into a rural firefighting department on top of an urban department and purchase several $400,000 water shuttles. You know, that's one way we can do it. As of right now, what we're having to do because of what happened there and the situation with the ski hill is we are going into automatic aid agreements or proposing them with the surrounding townships. So if we do have a confirmed structure fire, they automatically respond with their tankers. For one or two properties, that might not be a problem. We have to wait and see. This might affect our ISO rating, so business and residential insurance rates might have a chance of going up because of this. We'll have to wait and see. If this spreads farther, where we're developing on the fringes of the city, where we don't have water supply, and doing things without water supply, we're likely gonna see a reduction in our insurance rating, which will affect people's rates. So it isn't something where we're trying to put onerous regulations on things. We've been regulating things the same way for the last 20 years.
Why change?
Because it's not legally defensible if someone decides that they want to push things and you know, and not do things the correct way by the code. So that's why we're doing it. So it's legally defensible. It was a mistake 20 years ago. We're simply correcting that mistake and trying to keep the city safe. Simple as that. Actually, one more thing, talking about the difference between the #1 fire code and the 101 life safety code. The life safety code, as depicted, is correct. It basically looks at how to successfully get people to egress out of buildings, and it is about building safety. It does not, however, cover water supply, apparatus access, hazardous materials storage, flammable materials storage, and there's quite a few other things. The #1 fire code is not a building code. It's not meant to be, it's not used that way. The #1 fire code is a fire prevention code. It's a completely separate animal than the 101 code. However, just as an example, without the #1 fire code, when the hospital went in, we couldn't regulate how they built or where they put their helicopter pad. It covers very specific things that we do need depending on the development that goes in the city.
Thank you. Commissioner Plort?
Thank you, Your Honor. I have some questions for Mr. Swadley. Mr. Swadley, you're in construction in the city of Marquette. What projects have you built so far?
Well, Commissioner, I've been at it for 40 years. That's quite a long list.
Well, just give us the last year or so.
Well, I'm
what's recent?
I'm involved in senior housing. We've done, we did a retail center in the townships just recently. We're involved in residential, ongoing all the time.
Are you building Mill Creek?
Yes.
Okay. What interference, if any, have you received from the Marquette Fire Department during that construction?
With that specifically, that particular project?
Yes.
They look at the site plan review ordinance. They're one of the departments that have to review that. And, you know, we have adequate fire service protection and with the hydrants in that area. And, you know, and that's part of the process and is in compliance.
When they review your plans, is that routine, what you're talking about right now?
There's a routine review, yes. Conditions vary depending on the projects. Conditions that any one of your departments may put on it depends on the project.
In the over 40 years that you've been building in Marquette, have you ever had any interference from the Marquette Fire Department as far as building and construction is concerned?
Well, it's a pretty generalized statement, and there's many different specific incidents where we'd have to go back and track discussions and things like that. It's pretty hard to put a generalization on that. You know, the point is your 101 has been functioning very well with all of these projects.
Well, my point for asking the questions is why, honestly, do you feel this change to NFP 1 fire code is a threat to you and your business?
we look at it as a local government overreach and a redundancy on existing NFPA 101 that's been serving you, as attested by the fire chief, for many years. If they have been enforcing provisions of NFPA 1 that supersede 101, they haven't had legal jurisdiction to do that. All right? And the devil's in the details, of course.
But at this point, you don't know whether that's happened or not.
Ask that again, exactly what
At
you're
this
asking.
point, you don't know whether enforcing NFPA 1 fire code, whether it's on the books or not, has been a problem for
Well, you
construction.
just had one example by Mr. Curran on his project and his site plan review where the fire department wanted him to run a city water main over half a mile to put fire suppression into a project that the building code didn't require it. It was deemed 1 and 2 family. Now, he opted to do,
Buildings are sprinkled.
he opted to do that as a result of the process, but he didn't have to run a city water main. I mean, are we getting to that point where you are requiring developers to run city water mains that aren't even on their property, that impact and benefit many other properties?
Thank you, sir. No further questions.
Commissioner Baldini.
Thank you, Your Honor. Last week, I think it was last week, we had a meeting here to review the Modern Land Development Code. And I think you were here, Your Honor, the two of us, and it's going to be a 12 to 18-month review of all of the planning commission, the zoning things of that nature. Two things came up under the informal discussion, because then the planning commission met later. One was that we have a real shortage of housing in town, and the other thing that became very clear with that was that the rules and regs in Marquette are not very receptive or friendly to creating an atmosphere you can build more. And that was very loud and clear at that meeting. The second thing is that we're going to be reviewing this, and I don't know if in that review this NFPA 101 is going to get in there, but I suspect some of that is going to be involved in that discussion. And so I do feel very strong that Marquette City does have a significant number of rules and regulations, and people do stop you on the street and comment and tell you that. And I don't think I'm the only commissioner who has heard that. And secondly, we have adopted, I think last month or the month before, the McKean contract, and which we're going to go through and review a number of these things. And so I'm just wondering that on one hand we're doing this, and on the other hand we're going through with a review process with our own staff and with a number of community people who are going to have to be involved, and with the planning commission in that process. So I don't know what this all means, and maybe somebody can help clarify that for me, but are we being somewhat redundant in what we're doing here? On one hand, we've hired somebody to come in and consult with us, and maybe that's not the specificity of this, but at our meeting we held last week, there was a lot of discussion about not this particular ordinance, but a whole series of things in that nature. And so I'm struggling with it, okay? In terms of what we're doing here, and we have this other project that's going to be going on for 12 months, maybe 18 months, reviewing some of this. I know the other ordinance here is the burn ordinance in the city. I think that's a little different than this one. But I would almost like to see a pause, sort of us adopting some more, I don't know, building codes, restrictive things, whatever it might be, until we actually have our own planning commission and our own people and our own committee look at this. But I mean, that's just sort of where I'm at on this one at this point. So.
Commissioner Conley.
I see a difference between land use and development in fire safety. We have a clear recommendation from our fire department, people we trust, who we hired to take care of this, and I'm going to go with them. I don't think this has anything to do with our long-term development plans. I think it has to do with the safety of our citizens. So I'm backing the chief on this.
Commissioner Cambenzi.
But my only comment is that at that meeting we were at, there was a lot of discussion about the city of Marquette having all of these rules and regs, whether it's by the fire department, or by our planning people, or whoever it might be. We were hearing that, I was hearing it very loudly and clearly at that meeting. And it doesn't have necessarily the issue of fire protection. I think this city has taken a lead on doing fire inspections for rentals and things of that nature. And we've done that, and I think that's very commendable for this city. But mandating these other types of things, because the state mandates it, but now we're going to put an additional mandate on it by a city, and that's one of the complaints you hear about here. We have the county, the state, and now we're going to have the city. So.
Commissioner Cambenzi.
I guess in my experience with the public schools or in private development, it seems like where we're at now in private development, people know where to go. At the public schools, when we've done projects, it's hard to know if we're dealing with the county or the state. And I guess one thing that stood out to me is, are we going to be causing more confusion? Because I feel like right now there is some clarity, and I'd like to know more about the differences between the two life codes. I guess that's where I'm at. I just don't want to make it more difficult if the levels of protection are similar.
Commissioner Conley.
One of the many reasons I live within the city limits, and not all of us do. If somebody said here they were from Marquette, well, they're from Marquette Township. I live in the city because I like the structure. It offers protections for me, my neighbors, my family, my property. If I want to live in an unstructured environment with less regulation, I'll live way the heck out. That's fine. I'll go to Scandia or something like that, where people suit themselves to a greater extent. But I don't think we can compromise on fire safety. Let's not make it about development. Let's start with safety first, and then go from there.
Commissioner Reynolds.
Ian, I have a follow-up with kind of what Commissioner Baldini was going with. Let's say we held off on this. Let's say we did do it in the 12, 18 months and we enacted this as part of that plan, and you are pretty much already doing exactly what this says. Is the fear that people will try to slip under the radar and not do exactly what you're doing during that 12-month time? Is that, because if you're already trying to enforce what currently this actually is that your fear?
Yeah, the problem is, and as has happened already, is if you have people push it, the way things are adopted now, you could have DLP turn around and say, sorry, we're not putting the 8 hydrants in around the new hospital because you can't force us to. Or the development that we have going in, I'm gonna forget the name of it, right by the water treatment plant, Nordic Bay. They're working with the city to put the infrastructure in to protect it. They could turn around and say, sorry, we're not doing it. It's the exact same thing. We're not a rural department. If you want to put something in on the fringes of the city system, it has to get covered one way or another. And we're not set up as a rural firefighting department with tankers. That's not how we operate. We're in an urban development area. We're an urban department. That's how we fight fires. If we want to turn around, like I said, and add that capability to us, we can try and do that, but you're looking at multi-millions of dollars worth of equipment. At some point, we have to protect the structures going in. And when we're not set up to be that type of department like the townships are, you either have to develop where there is a water system or extend the water system. Or again, provide us with the equipment we need to be a rural department on top of an urban department. One way or another, those structures have to be protected, and the people that use them. And that's where the problem's coming in, is we're having people push the envelope and try not to protect their properties.
Mr. Swadley, did you have a reply, perhaps? No, I want to hear what he says.
All due respect, we're having an academic discussion here.
It's fine.
Yeah, I don't think it's quite fair. Mr. Mahaney's project, I believe, is a 30-unit apartment building. The Michigan Building Code requires that under its use group. He chose to have that type of structure. It requires fire suppression. What does fire suppression mean? Well, he needs adequate fire flows and pressures and such, like fire chief would tell him. So let's assure that's, that's a fair example. I would just ask, as a point, to finish my rebuttal, I'd ask the fire services to specify exactly where in the city of Marquette where these suboptimal and dangerous conditions exist, and then how are they suboptimal and dangerous? And I don't think if there's an unproven assertion of these things, that should be the basis for you guys passing this. So,
Thank you.
Can I make one quick comment?
Uh,
I wanted to ask Kern a question.
Okay, let him, would you speak first, and then Commissioner Baldini has.
Go ahead, you might answer the question.
Sure. Just also keep in mind, there are numerous different ways of coming up with fire protection and fire suppression, okay? Mahaney's project, he's got to have a huge fire line. I've got them in some of my apartment buildings, and they're all monitored. Then you go into our little cabins at the campground, and we decided to do them as a commercial, basically as a mini hotel. And there's it's called a limited area sprinkler head, and we do that off of our domestic well system, okay? There's also different ways of meeting those criteria, like building the buildings more out of concrete or more out of steel. So there's a lot of different varieties that you can use from the Michigan building codes that the NFPA would directly conflict with. When they'd start saying, you have to have fire suppression or you have to have 8-inch lines, well, there's ways of give and take on different ways of designing your buildings. Just another tidbit of why we need to be careful with this, because there's so many different little options in here. And, Lynn and I have been building for years. We're here fighting for probably his grandkids and kids and my kids coming up in the industry and everybody else. We're not necessarily here for us. I mean, we've got lots of projects going on. It's for the future generations. So again, there's many different ways of meeting these fire criteria. So don't lock us into one path.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Baldini?
Well, just along, because what I've been reading, excuse me, thank you. What I've been reading, and the meeting we also had here in the city, was that we need to adopt a much more flexible planning system for the community in terms of lot sizes, in terms of other rules and regulations. And the one rule that fits all is not working, even the people who were in here to consult with us that night. And that's why we hired them to talk about that. And that's why I'm suggesting that we're adopting this. There's a state rule, there's a county rule, and now there's going to be a city rule. And people are telling us that I don't think any of us are saying that we're being light on or derelict on fire protection, but there are different rules and regs depending on the structure, depending on the material you use, what sort of way do you provide the pressure if that's required. And I just think this, once again, just puts Marquette in that position of being over mandating on specificities of if we want development. And that's, and we just voted a month ago to an $80-some thousand contract to bring in somebody to help us work out some of these things. So I'm thinking that doesn't this one wait for a while, maybe until we get that done, because we're not exposing the community to unsafe living situations. But it will require another application, I'm quite sure, and another review and so on and so forth. So
I would just like to ask a quick question of the fire chief. Again, why is it that the NFPA 1 is being adopted? Is this a choice, or is it mandated by the state? Why are we adding this on?
The NFPA 1 fire code is a fire prevention code. Without this, we have no way to control water supply. We have no way to control apparatus access to get to a building. We have no way to control how people store hazardous materials, flammable materials, and those processes. This isn't a novel code that we're just pulling out just for our city. It's used across the country by numerous urban departments in the UP. It's used. Sault Ste. Marie uses it, City of Menominee. We're not the only ones, and we have been using it for the last 20 years. Legally, it wasn't adopted. So what I'm trying to do is to maintain the way we've been doing things for the last 2 decades legally. That's all. I'm not trying to change, add anything on, do anything differently. I just want to make sure that if we're pushed, we can back it up in the courts. As of right now, we can't. And that does scare me on a fire safety and life safety level in the city of Marquette.
Good, thank you. Commissioner Cambenzi?
Well, I mean, I see both sides of this, but I think what the problem is right now we probably have 2 properties out on 550 that, that aren't within, I guess, our water supply that we need to be able to have that protection. We have RFPs coming up on the land around there, but I'm wondering if a happy medium for now would be to maybe contract with the township for those 2 properties, the Ski Hill and Mr. Curran's development. Should we need that while we work towards extending the water and sewer out there, that it's eventually going to go in. But right now we don't have enough development, I guess, to award that to go in. But I think it's coming. And so as we work through the Heartwood Forest property plan, we have the zoning thing coming up. I think there's a happy medium here where, for the time being, until we get to the point where we can put the water and sewer in, if this is the only area it's happening, can we look at that to make sure that we have protection, that we are listening to our fire chief, but that we're also listening, I guess, to the others in our community?
Commissioner Conley?
Well, if we're talking about development of the Heartwood, let's look at the topography and what we're going to sell and where the utilities go. Right now we have water mains coming out Division and down McClellan, and they stop at that intersection. We don't have them going down toward the ski hill, but that question's already been taken care of. That's separate. When we talk about selling Heartwood property and putting in fire protection, they're going to be able to tap into the main that goes right down McClellan. If you go further down 553, that property isn't going to be for sale. It just isn't. You look, I've hiked it, I just know it. It's not the saleable portion. The portion is further north on McClellan, and that's already protected by a very large water main and backed up with flow through down Division. So let's not use that as an excuse to put this off or to counter a proposal by our fire chief. It just isn't going to happen. We're not going to develop that part of the Heartwood. We're not going to have to worry about that. City won't have to put in a water main for that purpose.
Commissioner Cambenzi?
So does that mean that do we go back after these 2 properties, or, I mean, what are we doing then? Is that your suggestion?
I suspect those properties are already done. I don't think we can roll that back, but we can't use the argument of, well, we're going to have to put a water main for the Heartwood in, because we're not. It just
You don't know that.
You aren't going to build a house on the side of a cliff there. So I don't think so. So let's not use that as an argument against it. Let's get back to fire safety and talk about that and not get off into
Okay,
some
my question is,
speculative,
my question
I'm
is, what do we
talking-
do with the, what do we?
I
do-
think I
had
have
the
the floor
floor.
right now.
Sarah,
I
hold
think
it.
I have the
I
floor
had the
right
floor.
now.
I'm
He called
sorry.
it- called on me.
Hold it, hold it,
No,
hold it.
I was called upon to speak. You
Yeah.
started dialogue.
I do
He-
believe
he
he's
motioned
first.
to
I
me.
do believe he's first. He was
I
talking.
wasn't done. He
kind of
started
implied-
talking to me when you called upon me. I'd like to finish. What do we do with those two
I'll
properties
yield.
that are not in compliance?
Yeah, I spoke on that earlier, but what we're doing right now is, it hasn't been formalized, but I've talked to the fire chiefs for both Marquette Township and Chocolate Township about automatic aid agreements, so that if we do get a confirmed structure fire at that property, that they will automatically dispatch a tanker truck to there, so we have firefighting water supply. I think that's one thing that we're missing in this conversation. They keep talking about fire suppression, water sprinklers. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about firefighting water supply. That's a completely separate issue and is not covered under the Michigan Building Code. I don't want it to set a precedent where just because we have townships around us with certain different jurisdictions, with certain firefighting capabilities, that we're just gonna rely on them in lieu of using the code we should be to keeping developments using the city system. Yes, we have that available through mutual aid possibly. Again, I've had those discussions. We don't have anything concrete yet on the books, but I don't think we should, I don't personally want to be using other jurisdictions' equipment to come into the city because we don't have the capabilities, because we're pushing the limit on, putting developments in or putting anything in where we don't have the water supply. We're not set up to do that, and unless we take that over and do, like I said before, do that type of firefighting, it can be a slippery slope, I guess. And there is a possibility, even with those two properties. I know the ski hill has been there for years, and we've tried to protect it the best we can because they don't have water supply, but we might see a reduction in the insurance rating just because of these two. I don't know yet, but I can guarantee you we will if this moves on to another development and another development, putting them in this way. And you will see both commercial and residential insurance rates go up because of it, because our fire protection will be going down as a result.
Commissioner Conley.
I'm done.
Commissioner Frazier.
I'd like to see maybe an adaptive to the form code saying all hazardous material structures have to be built out of concrete, or any future developments have to be built out of concrete. That'd be a great way to get around all the codes. Just have your building built out of concrete, you don't have to worry about fires, right? Like, of course, your roof might catch on fire a little bit, but the building still be there, just the roof be on fire. So maybe our two developers can find a way to make a roof out of concrete. There you go, an extra way for you guys to make money.
Commissioner Plard.
I just would like to get clarification from Chief Davis. Chief, I heard you make a comment earlier, and I just want to make sure that I heard what I think I heard. You said that this fire code would not supersede the Home Building Association code. How did you word that? What did you say at the time?
Yeah, basically there's a state act called the Steele-Durosset Single State Building Code, and that basically says that the Michigan Building Code is the rule of law. And even though we use the 101 Life Safety Code, which does conflict sometimes with the Michigan Building Code, we can make recommendations to the County Building Codes Office, but they have the final say on new construction, on how it's built. We can't, by state law, go above and beyond the Michigan Building Code. The only place that we have jurisdiction is on maintenance of those fire protection assets, or the fire protection that's put into the building. We can make sure that they maintain it after it's built, but we don't have any legal say above and beyond the Michigan State Building Code. And the thing is, the NFPA 1 Fire Prevention Code is not a building code. It doesn't speak to how a building is built. It's the things that you put in it, like flammable materials, combustible materials, hazardous materials, and then how they're protected in firefighting water supply, the angle you have to put the entrance roads so that our fire trucks can access it, things like that. It's not a building code. So anything that's not covered by the Michigan State Building Code can be covered by the NFPA codes, things like heliports, like I mentioned with the hospital going in. That isn't covered directly by the Michigan State Building Code. The FCC regulates it, but that is under our NFPA codes. And again, we've been using these for the last 2 decades. We're not trying to do anything above and beyond what we've already been doing for the last 20 years. It's just we're trying to make sure that if we get pushback, we have a legally defensible way to defend ourselves and make sure that it's followed.
Thank you.
Mr. Baldini.
As I understand, the adoption of this is going to pretty much take a whole lot of property in this community out of development, because if there's not a water line to it, and if you want to be the development, you're going to have to put the water line in. And in effect, I mean, it gets back to that code. Even though you may have put in some suppression thing, we will have people within the city government saying, oh no, you're going to do it this way, and it's going to cost you exorbitant thousands of dollars more. And that's why I think we should wait until we continue and complete our review of what's going on in the city. We've survived, as you said, for 20 years, and I think we can survive for 12 more months. But I just think it's one of those long-term things where we're going to impose some more regulations. But that's where I'm at.
Commissioner Reynolds.
Well, this has been an interesting discussion that I didn't think would go here. There's that. I'm just putting my last cents, and I appreciate you all coming, and I appreciate you, Chief Davis. But as I came into this, I thought to myself the same thing as Tom was going forward with, and I think him and I hear often from people in town that kind of thing that is more difficult. And I'm really excited about what's going to be happening in the next 12 to 18 months with this plan. So that's why I'll be voting in that direction.
Commissioner Frazier.
Basically, what you're saying, Ian, is you're going to help Ron. If somebody comes after us legally, you're going to help Ron in court by having this in the city code book somewhere. You're going to help Ron in court, or somebody, one of his friends, come after him in court saying, "This is what you have. I'm going to go after you for this certain thing. City's protected because this is in the rule book somewhere." So whatever if this gets adopted, it protects the city in the rule books over something that somebody comes after you or something like that for something, right?
Generally, no. The reason that it's worked for 20 years is that people have abided by it for 20 years. You know, if someone decides they don't want to follow it, they don't have to follow it because it's not adopted. The reason that the city's safe now for the last 20 years is because people have voluntarily, when we've made a recommendation, they've followed it. They've followed the codes. We're not trying to change anything going forward as to the way we are doing things and the way we are enforcing things. We are already enforcing the NFPA 1 code, and we have for 20 years. The problem is if someone pushes it legally, they can turn around and say, we're not following it because it's not adopted. The reason that we have had the success we have is because we have been enforcing those codes in error. I didn't realize when I got into this job what was written in that ordinance. It wasn't my decision 20 years ago the way that went in. You know, when I was the fire inspector or the fire marshal, I was enforcing all of the NFPA codes, which are referenced in 1 and 101. If they were voluntarily followed when we gave our recommendation to developers, to the people that put the plans into the city to build. Now, without having this in the ordinance, there's no teeth. They can turn around and say, well, sorry, it's not adopted, we're not following it. And we're not gonna have any fire protection beyond the fire suppression systems. I understand where they're coming from, where the Michigan Building Code requires fire suppression systems, which is sprinkler systems. That has nothing to do with firefighting water supply. It's a completely separate thing. I mean, basically, again, we have an urban fire department and an urban city. On the fringes of that, you have no water supply. And people are wanting to build. I understand that. We do not have the capabilities to fight fires in a rural setting. We're not set up that way. So unless we want the townships to completely take over fire suppression for the fringes of the city, there's nothing I can do to protect those properties. I don't have the resources. It would take at least $1 million worth of equipment plus training for our fire department to adequately protect those areas that are outside the city's water system.
Are you aware there is a dry hydrant out there?
Whoa, hold it. Let's go with Commissioner Baldini
Well,
first.
Chief, I appreciate the town is safe, but you are making a change, okay? I mean, you had discretionary authority. Now you're going to have mandatory authorities. That is a change, okay? So let's understand that. That's the point I'm making. We have property. One of the things we're going to start discussing is how do we develop the other properties in this town. The point you're making is a good one, but we are still discussing how are we going to get there? Lot sizes, extensions. So if somebody comes here and wants to put something out in what you consider the rural part, they can't afford it. We're not going to do it as a city. We're not going to grow as a city. And maybe we should make some arrangements with townships. I don't know. Matter of fact, maybe we should all have some more working arrangements together. But anyway, it is a change, okay? What we're doing here tonight is we're making this mandatory. And that's, if that's what the commission wants, then that's what we will do. But that is a change, and let's understand that, okay?
To me, it's not a drastic change. I'm leaning that way. It's going to affect our insurance rating if we don't do this. I wish I would have seen these papers ahead of time so I could look at it more. But I think we're going to have to vote on this soon and make a decision. Commissioner Cambenzi.
I move that we table ordinance 654, repealing chapter 26, section 19, and section 20 of the Marquette City Code, and adopting a new chapter 26, section 19, and section 20 until, I guess, further time. I want more information. I think we have 2 parcels right now that are grandfathered in, but I think we need to look at the pros and cons of this, and I don't have those in front of me, and I want those for a lot of the same reasons that Mayor Pro Tem Baldini has mentioned.
She made a motion to table, correct? We need a second.
I support that.
Commissioner Baldini, support?
Yes.
Okay. Seeing we need no discussion on that, we take a vote?
Your Honor, I think technically it's a motion to postpone either to an
Do we need a
indefinite time
time?
or a definite time, because a motion to table is not debatable.
Okay.
So are you going to, is the motion to postpone to a definite time or an indefinite time?
So Commissioner Cambenzi.
I guess I would say 6 months, just to give us time to gather more data or information to compare the two.
Commissioner Baldini, is that okay with you?
Yeah, I support that.
Okay. Does that still require a vote, City Attorney?
Yes.
Okay. All those in favor of tabling the motion as stated, to postpone the motion as stated, please say yes.
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 Opposed?
No.
That passes 5-2. It is postponed. We move to our second public hearing of the evening, which is ordinance 656, amending Chapter 26 of the Marquette City Code by adopting a new Section 26-88 open burning. City Clerk, do we have the background, please?
Thank you, sir. Although the city code does not currently contain reference to open burning, the topic has historically been included in the code. Recently, staff has determined that state law at present does not allow for appropriate local enforcement related to open burning. As it is important that a clear open burning ordinance be in place to ensure a reasonable level of fire and life safety and property protection from the hazards created by fire, staff is recommending the adoption of a new open burning ordinance. Fiscal effect none. Recommendation, adopt ordinance number 656, which amends Chapter 26 of the Marquette City Code by adopting a new Section 2688, open burning. Alternatives as determined by the commission.
Chief Davis, anything you care to add to that? Nothing? Okay, we're going to open this public hearing. If anyone wishes to address the commission on this item, you have 3 minutes. We need name, home address, city or township. Does anybody wish to address us on this item? Anyone? Seeing none, we're going to close the public hearing on this item. Commissioners, do we have a motion? Do we have a motion? Do we have a motion? Commissioner Baldini.
I move that we adopt ordinance 656, which amends Chapter 26 of the Marquette City Code by adopting a new section 2688 referring to open burning.
Is there a second? Commissioner Frazier.
Second.
Okay, this requires a roll call vote, I believe. What? You want some discussion? Sorry. Is there any discussion?
I just have one question. Just reading the background. So, is this enforceable? Is that am I just reading it wrong? I just want to make sure, like, this is legally enforceable if we ticket somebody for it or something like that.
It is, and it has been in the city of Marquette
That's what I thought.
in the
Okay,
past.
I just wanted to make sure.
Commissioner Baldini?
Well, I think, as I understand, this doesn't apply to people having their pit in their backyard for recreation, or does it?
It does.
It does.
It's never been legal in the city of Marquette to have a pit fire in your backyard for recreation.
Can I withdraw my support for this motion or vote no against it?
You can vote however you wish.
Mr.
Yeah.
Attorney,
You made the motion, right?
can I withdraw my support for the motion? I thought it,
Support the motion. You
pardon
made
me?
the motion. You didn't support it, you made it.
Okay.
you're
I
gonna
just will
withdraw
vote
your-
no
you can
against it
withdraw
then.
your
I thought
motion if
I
the-
thought we could do open burn in your contained pit in your backyard with your neighbors.
He could just vote no, correct?
Vote no, yeah,
Okay.
sorry, I made the motion, so.
Yeah. Commissioner Frazier, do you have anything to add?
As I understand, the fire chief could probably inform us, but I think you're allowed to have fires in your backyard as long as they're contained, on an outdoor fireplace or something contained. You just can't have a bonfire, basically, is what they're saying, is you can't have an open fire that could easily spread to somewhere else. If it's a commercial, if it's a residential unit you could buy that's contained, you're allowed to do it. Am I correct?
Yes and no. Historically, in the city of Marquette, you have not been able to have a recreational fire on your property unless it's used for the processes of cooking. The ordinance that we had before specified that it had to be in a cooking appliance. I've actually made it less restrictive and allowed patio burners as long as they're used for cooking. And then there also are setbacks so that people aren't building fires or having fires on flammable decks next to garages, things like that. That's basically all it is. But it's never been legal in the city of Marquette to just have an open fire in the backyard. It also falls under the city's nuisance ordinance. If it causes a nuisance to any neighbors, we have always come by and put them out. That's been past practice in the city for years.
So Commissioner Baldini, what he's saying is, if you have a fire in your backyard, just make sure you have hot dogs nearby. Say you're cooking. Offer the fire chief some hot dogs. You might be okayed, but that's up to this discussion.
Commissioner Plord.
Well, I'm not a person that likes a lot of regulation as far as government regulation is concerned, and I have two problems with this ordinance. Normally, Chief, I see what you're trying to accomplish, but the two problems I have with this ordinance is, number one, I've heard from people several times now that you can use the fire pit as long as you have a package of hot dogs around. Well, I don't like that. I don't like it at all. I don't think it's appropriate. The other thing is, I've heard that while we've never ever had it, it's never been legal in Marquette. I don't know how much that determines whether it should be legal now or not. And for my part, I don't think it determines anything. Fire pits are all over the city. They're being used all the time, and I haven't heard of any problems or complaints to a point where they couldn't be handled based on what we have already. So as the ordinance sits right now, I can't support it. I could support an ordinance very similar to this that allows fire pits in the backyards or on property specifically contained, as Commissioner Frazier mentioned, because I agree. I don't think we should give permission to just build a bonfire if you feel like it. And believe me, I'm aware of the fire codes because I had it in my last. I had to be aware of them in my last profession. But I know there are people that will try to cook a frozen turkey in deep fry it on a deck. It does happen. We should not allow it. But fire pits in the city of Marquette, they're going to happen tonight. They're going to happen tomorrow. And if we have an ordinance that essentially we're not going to enforce under certain conditions, I don't think we should have the ordinance. I think the ordinance should say fire pits contained, basic fire pits that follow a particular fire code, however you want to word it, but specifically allow the fire pits that are going to happen tonight, tomorrow, and the next day, all the way through. And I think the ordinance should read that. So as it stands right now, I cannot support this ordinance as it's written.
Chief, when does a fire pit become a bonfire? I mean, how do you draw that line? That's, if we say no to this, we're saying that you can have fire pits, but at what point does a fire pit become a bigger fire, and that's not legal to have? Can you determine that?
Yes, the ordinance does not allow fire pits. The ordinance only allows patio burners or cooking appliances. So they are in a contained appliance, basically, off the ground. It does not allow in-ground fires in the city of Marquette as it's written.
Okay, I want to ask this one question and I'll close. You've all seen these fire rings, 3 bricks, 3 pavers high in a circle. If someone has that in their backyard and they got a fire in that, is that legal?
Not by the ordinance. And and honestly, we've never allowed that. I've been in the fire department for 22 years. We've never allowed fire pits in backyards. The problem is we had an ordinance on the books. And honestly, when it got recodified, it didn't get pushed through. It was eliminated by more than likely an oversight. And that's why I'm re-putting in an open burning ordinance. We've been going by, in the interim, we've been going by the State Department of Environmental Quality laws. The problem is we can't enforce state law. We've been basically regulating it by the state law, but only the police department can write on state laws. We can't, or enforce state laws. We can't. So it hinders our ability, again, to enforce the rules that have been on the books for a number of years. And I'm just trying to rectify that. It's completely up to the commission on how you want this to read. This is my best recommendation for, again, looking at an urban city with a high density population and the possibility of a lot of nuisance complaints because of fires if we allow them, and the possibility of combustibles or flammables near there and an increase in fires in the city if you just let people burn in their backyard whenever they want, however they want. This is my best recommendation, but it's completely, again, up to the commission. If they want to allow it, I'm fine with it. I'm just giving you my best recommendation.
Commissioner Baldini, thank you.
I think there's agreement. We don't want to have a lot of people with barrels in their backyard again or something. We just came from a solid waste meeting. And but I do think we got to clarify this for the public, and I don't know if I can move to table my motion also to somehow do some clarification for this, because I think there is agreement that we don't want a whole lot of fires in people's backyards. But I do know people, how many of us have been invited to somebody's home where they've had a fire in their backyard? Come on over tonight or something, okay? Because they have one of those little trenches. So they think it's legal. And I think we have not only a responsibility to do the public safety, but I think we have a responsibility to say, wait a second, folks, let's explain what is and isn't applicable in this situation. I just think I'm a little struck by some of that, but.
Commissioner Conley?
If you look at the whole ordinance, there's some good things in it. Let's look at page 2, and particularly Commissioner Port, because you brought it up. What if we went to paragraph C, patio wood burning units, and removed number 3, the patio wood burning unit shall only be used for cooking purposes. That allows patio cooking, or patio wood burning units, and retains the rest of the ordinance. Would that be acceptable if we said patio burning units are okay? Here it says they're only okay if you got a pack of weenies or marshmallows nearby. If we just take that number 3 out, shall only be used for cooking purposes, we retain the rest of the ordinance, and still allow patio burning units, whether it's hot dogs or no.
Yeah, that would work for me fine.
Okay,
Yeah, I agree,
well,
because
then we can-
when you talk about 1, 2, and 4, they're absolutely pertinent. No question about that.
Okay, well, I move to amend the motion to remove section 3, number 1C3, which will remove the phrase, the patio wood burning unit shall only be used for cooking purposes.
We need a second. Commissioner Plord?
I'll second.
Discussion.
I think this will make this ordinance more acceptable to more people. That's the effort here. And still retain what our fire chief recommends to us in terms of fire safety.
Commissioner Plord?
I agree, and I would like to give the fire chief and the fire department the ability to make sure that things are safe when it comes to this. And I also want to clarify, when I say fire pit, I do mean what Mayor Campana described as a brick structure or a commercial structure that can be purchased in a lot of different stores in the area that I know people have. And I agree with Mayor Pro Tem Baldini when he says that I think all of us have been invited to sit in front of one. And I don't see a problem with it at this point. I can say this also to you, to the fire chief, that if I'd be happy to revisit this if it becomes a problem at one time or another. But I think this is really the best way to go for this particular ordinance. That's why I'll support it this way.
Commissioner Conley?
As with any ordinance, the city commission can amend, repeal, change, reinforce, whatever they want at their pleasure. We've taken that approach to a number of other ordinances. We don't have to state that specifically. We could come back and, I don't know, I think the charter limits how soon you can revisit it, but even next month we could come back.
Commissioner Baldini?
Well, I think amending this does not address what the public probably still perceives as their right out there. And yes, the commission can always amend its ordinance after somebody's been arrested. And I think we have not only an obligation to provide health and safety, but we also have an obligation to explain to people what they can or can't do. And I think that was tonight, to at least maybe 5 or 6 of us, a surprise that you can't do these things in your backyard with your neighbors. So if we are, maybe I'm just not that sharp about this, but I suspect there's other people in town who have the same thought about this. So I'm not sure this amendment's going to solve the overall thing here, but, and I'm sorry I made that motion, but go ahead.
Commissioner McCambenzi?
Just a question for our fire chief. So we don't legally have one on the books now.
Correct.
Okay, so, I mean, I guess I have heard people operating under the assumption that as long as you have food around, that it's legal. So I guess we're not changing much, and we are allowing it now without food. Can you talk a little more about the permit process and the fee, or what
Sure.
that might
What
be?
we've done in the past and what I wrote into this one was for religious, cultural, or traditional activities, we have, excuse me, allowed permits for bonfires, larger fires. That permit process will stay the same as it has been in practice. Basically, if it's a small fire, our fire inspector will go inspect the area where it's going to be. If it's going to be a small fire, we just let them take care of it. We've had the Boy Scouts and other organizations do that with very small fires. We've also had very, very large bonfires. Last year we had one at NMU. We've had some for, I believe, Midsummer Night Festival. We do require at that point that they have a fire truck and a full complement of firefighters on scene, both to make sure it doesn't get away from them and then to help put it out at the end, to make sure that's safe. But that's what the burn permit process is for, is just for those religious, traditional fires, for larger fires.
Okay, so the average person wouldn't have to come and get a burn permit? No.
We have to vote on the amendment. Okay, it's been moved and second. So, all those in favor of the amendment say yes.
Yes.
Opposed? That carries 7-0. Now we have to go back to the original motion. The original motion was made by Commissioner Baldini. Do you want to continue with the motion as amended? It's already
Your
been,
Honor,
it's already
that's
there.
been done.
So
Now
then
you
we're
have
gonna
to
vote on it.
the motion as amended now.
Okay, so-
The main motion as
Okay.
amended.
I think I
And-
indicated how I'm going to vote.
not seen, yes, you did. Not seen any more discussion. We're gonna vote on the motion as amended. And this requires a roll call, if I'm correct.
This is an ordinance. We normally do
Yep.
ordinances. by
City Clerk?
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Cambenzi?
We're voting on what Commissioner Conley recommended right now.
The main motion is being voted on with the one line that was stricken through the amendment process.
Yes.
Commissioner Conley?
Yes.
Commissioner Frazier?
Yes.
Commissioner Plord?
Yes.
Commissioner Reynolds?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baldini?
No.
Mayor Campana?
No. That's correct, no. That carries 5-2. Okay, we come to our first public comment of the evening. Public comment's a time when citizens may address the commission. We give you 3 minutes. We need name, home address, city or township. You may, again, speak to the commission or reserve time to speak on one of the business items coming up. I'm going to open public comment. Does anybody wish to speak to the commission at this point?
Hello again. L.R. Swadley, 135 Hidden Springs, Marquette Township. I look at this as one big community. That first 3 minutes went awful quick, so I appreciate I have a couple more things. I want to bring kind of closure to what we were saying here earlier. And, you know, no one wants a compromise in safety. It should never be implied that if you come up and object or oppose that you're in favor of having less safe homes and buildings, all right, in community. You know, and I do believe that we have an outstanding fire department and police department. And however, the Michigan Uniform Building Code is a very comprehensive law and set of rules that are updated every 3 years by the best minds in the private and public sectors. It's a very laborious process. It goes on nationally, and Michigan adopts it. There are representation by fire departments, fire marshals on those boards. And, you know, I'm really not here tonight for any specific project or anything to do with my business. I'm here because I'm concerned that our city develops and creates an overall practical, safe, affordable, and predictable development, review, and approval process. And because it strikes to the heart of affordability in our communities. As builders and developers, we're on the front lines of that every day, making things work. You know, and so going forward, I just wanted you to know that, and that you know, I found it also. It's kind of, I've been doing this for a long time, and when the city zoning department, fire department, police department, Dennis's departments, you know, tell you that this is something you have to do. We never thought it was a suggestion. Quite honestly, it was an implied requirement, and you know, and therefore we all get along. I put in more fire hydrants than required because it made sense, and these types of things. So there is that implication that if you're in disagreement, you don't get your permit. Okay, you don't get your permit in this community, and you have to comply with what is laid out for you. You can have academic discussions on their merits, and you may be able to convince on this or otherwise. Your building codes, your zoning, our building codes are very comprehensive and very good and very safe, and they have the best interests of the community. And your zoning does too. We just want you to realize there is a cumulative effect of these things, of the minutia and minutia. It's every one of them by themselves stand on their own, very good, well-intended, but it's the cumulative effect of these things you guys really got to be aware of. So thank you for listening, and I'm glad you table it and get some more background on it all. Make a good decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Matt Ludenberger, 1406 Garfield Ave here in Marquette, Michigan. I'm going to change gears because an hour and 15 minutes of discussion of codes can get kind of tedious even for the most code breaker that I can be. Anyways, I'm here to talk because last week I couldn't make it to the podium on time. You guys had a discussion, and part of your discussion at the end of the night was about the Dark Sky Park on Presque Isle. I'm a nighttime photographer. I love going out. Right now, primarily, I go out to Little Presque for the Northern Lights and the view out there. A dark sky park in the city of Marquette would be a selling point, a huge selling point. People will come from miles around. At the same time, getting them through the UP is probably the toughest part about it all. When somebody sits at Sini and they go, wow, this is a dark sky, let's stay here. So that's really feasible. And I bring it up on Presque Isle because it would be a great spot if you restricted it. And in a restriction kind of way, I mean, like park your car at the light or at the break wall and walk up the lighted path to Cabogan's pavilion and his gravesite, and put up little things that say, hey, this is far enough. But if you put up little solar lights, they won't bother night gazing or sky gazing. You can do that on both sides. The tough part about being on the north side of Presque Isle is that you do have Middle Island Point, and asking any resident to turn off their lights is just going to be impossible. So having a dark sky on that side of the island requires a little bit further going up the road, and that's dangerous. And I'll admit right here and now, I've done that. I've broken the law, taken some great photos, but I was scared to death of all the animals that are in there. So yes, there is some danger effects that we have to worry about. At the same time, there's not many other places to have a dark sky park in Marquette. We have a lot of lights. We have a lot of things that block the view, and in some way it takes much more than just turning off the lights to make a great photo. So that was what I'd like to say about the dark sky discussion, and unfortunately I don't have any time to say the other things, but I'd like to say, Mr. Baldini, your whole conversation for the Paris Accord last week was not not on a high volume for the record, so even though my volume on the computer is turned up all the way, I didn't hear what you had to say, and it was a pretty long discussion, and I'm pretty environmentally friendly, and I was curious. So just please remind yourselves, talking to the microphones, make sure that you can hear yourself over these speakers. It is really important for things like on the record, the discussion you just had tonight. If you're not on the microphone, if you can't hear yourself speak, it's not on the record. And that's dangerous for a city understanding of things. Now, last, I guess, I get 4 seconds, so I'm not going to try. Thanks, folks.
Thank you.
Oh, no, number 8. Sorry, I'd like to speak on number 8.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Again, good evening. Yorma Lankin, 8 Marquette Drive here in the city of Marquette. Thank you for postponing the ruling. There's a lot of things to be discussed in education on both sides, so I'm glad that you are taking time to venture, because once you make that decision, it's always hard to go backtrack on it. So thank you for taking the time. Just a kind of an interesting point, there's this incredible huge river that runs right there by the ski hill, and I think every fire truck has a pump in it, and I mean that will never freeze, that never runs out of water, that does not have a main break, main failure ever, and so that is always a solution. Every problem has a solution to it, so it doesn't have to be that the solution is the most expensive way to run 10 or 12 or 14-inch mains, and there are other solutions as well. Again, thank you for listening to us, and hopefully Mr. Swadley and the group Home Builder Association will give you additional information to make a good decision. But it's worked this long, why do it in one night? Again, thank you for listening.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Frank Verito, 350 East Ridge, Marquette. These are my opinions. Your reminder last year that the Picnic Rocks beach is eroding evoked no discussion. Now several more trees are doomed, including a large pine. The bench that's already been moved will soon need to be moved yet farther west. If you keep ignoring the problem, the day may come when the trail will need relocating and the most gorgeous woodland along our entire shoreline, aside from Presque Isle Park, will be lost. Eventually the boulevard may require relocation, but to where? This board ignored 15 years of pleas to preserve the northeast corner of the lakeshore site and to provide a buffer between it and Shiras Park. Nope, you went with the minimum setback. Keep ignoring the erosion and we'll have no place to move the boulevard short of constructing a bitterly expensive road on pilings. So long as action is likely imminent, doesn't it make sense to start studying the problem a year ago as requested, or would you prefer to wait until we lose additional acreage or labor costs double? For the sake of our natural places, this board needs to exercise vision. People live here for that beach, and you're just letting it erode away. You were also told of a sign at Shiras Park warning of dangerous currents at a section of beach where swimming is not restricted. The Picnic Rocks buoys lie north of the sign. Our Parks Department set a picnic table at the ideal location, except the sign harms the lake view. In a whole year, you've neglected to remove a sign that was inadvertently placed where no danger ever existed. So long as tree removal is imminent, why not take a few extra minutes and remove the sign while the crew is nearby? 9 years after the Lighthouse Park was promised us, we still have no access to the grounds. We were informed last year that the north chain link fence could be removed with no risks to safety or security, so to grant us access to at least the north third of the property. The manager advised we wait until the consultant's recommendations, which makes no sense. Phone the consultant for his opinion ahead of time. No one would oppose so long as the few dangerous overhead branches are secured. For 9 years, this board blew its commitment to the public ownership by procrastinating rather than moving the process along behind the scenes. When we needed our members to advocate for us, they sat on their thumbs. Even when the consultant was questioned about this fence during the Lighthouse Park tour, he gave a circuitous response. Other citizens also implore you to remove this eyesore from one of the world's great urban beaches. If you people could read a site plan or knew the configuration of the fence, you'd know what we're talking about. None of 7 bothered to attend the Lighthouse Park walkthrough on June 20th. Yes, a few tended to a zoning matter, but because no more than 3 can meet simultaneously, that left 4 who could have attended. That puts so much in perspective. The stunning beauty that most of us love Marquette for, and that draws people here, seems of low priority to you.
Anyone else? Does anyone else wish to address the commission? Seeing none, we're going to close public comment. We're going to move to the consent agenda. Do we have a motion for the consent agenda? Commissioner Frazier,
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda as written.
is there a second? Commissioner Reynolds,
Second.
any discussion? None? All those in favor, please say yes.
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 Opposed? That carries 7-0. Next, we have one item on unfinished business. That item is the Marquette Area Women's Roller Derby League, the lease agreement. City Clerk, if we could have that background, please.
Thank you, sir. The Marquette Area Women's Roller Derby League has requested the City Commission consider leasing the Lakeview Arena, Russell Arena, for the purposes of practices and bouts. Staff has worked with the city attorney and the Marquette Area Women's Roller Derby League to draft a standard lease agreement, which provides the terms and conditions of the request. Compensation shall consist of 5 equal monthly payments of $1,505. The term of the lease is May 15th, 2017 to September 10th, 2017. The proposed lease agreement was introduced at the Commission's June 12th, 2017 meeting and approved as recommended to move the lease agreement forward to the June 26th, 2017 meeting. Fiscal effect, the Lakeview Arena Fund will receive $7,525 with approval. Recommendation, approve the agreement for use of Lakeview Arena with the Marquette Area Women's Roller Derby League and authorize the mayor and clerk to sign the agreement. Alternatives as determined by the commission.
Commissioners, do we have a motion on this? Commissioner Plord,
I move that we approve the agreement for use of Lakeview Arena with the Marquette Area Women's Roller Derby League and authorize the mayor and the clerk to sign the agreement.
is there a second? Commissioner Frazier,
Second.
any discussion? Commissioner Plord,
Just a little bit. I am familiar with the women's Marquette Area Women's Roller Derby League, and one thing I have found out, they always pay their bills. And I think that's very commendable. It's a lot of fun in the city. A lot of people like it, and I think it's adding $7,525 to the Lakeview Arena Fund will help as well. And so that's why I'm supporting this motion.
Commissioner Frazier, anything?
I've been to the Derby once or twice before, and my daughter loved it. I think we should ask him to include our female commissioners and maybe some female from the city staff to include in the Derby, maybe have like a little competition, see if they could join, see if they could help out at least, have a little maybe women's Derby versus city Derby or something like that.
Any other comments? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor of this motion, please say yes.
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 Opposed? That carries 7-0. Next, we move to new business, of which we have 5 items tonight. The first, joint funding agreement with the United States Geological Survey. City Clerk, background, please.
Thank you, sir. The Marquette Hospital Transportation Improvements Project includes a new culvert crossing at the intersection of US 41 and 7th Street for the Whetstone Brook. The state of Michigan is requiring the city to place a flow gauge on the Whetstone Brook between 7th Street and Altamont Street to monitor flow events and provide an early warning system in the case water may crest into part of US 41 near Altamont Street. It is not anticipated that this will happen, as we have had many storm events of a large magnitude and cresting has not developed. However, it is part of the conditions of approval for the construction permit from the state. In addition to installation, the monitoring and maintenance will be performed by the United States Geological Survey, USGS. The USGS will have real-time information available on their website for this site. This agreement will allow the USGS to acquire a used flow gauge at a greatly reduced cost and provide the maintenance and monitoring from October 1st, 2017 to September 30th, 2022. Per the conditions of the state permit, this agreement will require renewal every 5 years. Fiscal effect, the total 5-year amount of the project is $39,900, and the project is eligible for funding under the Act 381 Brownfield Plan for the Duke Life Point Hospital project. Recommendation, direct the city manager to sign the joint funding agreement to allow the USGS to install a flow gauge on the Whetstone Brook and monitor/maintain the equipment for a period of 5 years. Alternatives, none, as this is a requirement for the construction permit by the state of Michigan.
Thank you. We have the Director of Community Development, Dennis Stakowitz, here. Dennis, is there anything you care to add, or is it clear as stated? Fire away. Okay, do we have a motion for this? Do we have a motion? Commissioner Plord.
I move that we direct the city manager to sign the joint funding agreement to allow the USGS to install a flow gauge on the Whetstone Brook and maintain the equipment for a period of 5 years.
Would there be a second, Commissioner Reynolds?
Second.
Any discussion? Commissioner Plord?
Only that it says it right in the alternatives. It's a requirement. So let's get it done.
Commissioner Reynolds, anything?
None.
Commissioner Baldini?
I agree with, I'm going to vote yes on this, but it is a requirement that we sort of got at the last minute. We never knew. This was one of those bureaucratic things that, oh, you want a permit? Let me tell you what else you're going to have to spend money on. And for example, I think at this place, Dennis, if it ever floods, we're probably in serious trouble in the whole city, aren't we?
This is one of those joys of working with Lansing requirements, but you know, it's not a situation where it's going to flood the entire city, but at this point it would cause a major situation at the roundabout we have now, which is downstream, of course, from where we're doing this project. And it's just one of those costs, you know, on top of the $165,000 we spent on an addendum to our consulting contract with DLZ to address this very issue. You know, you're looking at $200,000 right there total. So not very happy talking about it, and I wish I could have brought you an alternative, but sorry.
Commissioner Baldini?
You know, in reading some of our own municipal things and talking to other people, what's beginning to happen is Lansing's running out of money. So they still want to do these things, and so what they're doing is they're saying, we're going to get it done, you're going to pay for it. And we're seeing this, and not just this one, but I bet at the end of all this construction stuff in about 2-3 years, it'll be interesting to add up all of the new mandates that were put on us that we never anticipated coming into all of the work projects. But it's needed, we'll do it, let's move on. Thank you.
So Dennis, this is an unexpected expense that we didn't plan for.
Just a real short summary of the backstory on this. Once we got into project design, we had presented some things to MDOT that MDEQ had generally agreed with, but the MDOT hydraulics unit in Lansing didn't. And we had to redesign a bunch of things, consultant costs, back and forth, get those two to talk to one another, so on and so forth. This was the, I don't want to say least dangerous, least costly, you know, the cheapest, believe it or not, alternative to come up with that. And the other alternatives were redesign half of the project, redesign dig the storage basin deeper at the hospital and make a lake over there. I'm exaggerating this and being a little bit facetious, but you get the idea. There are a lot more costs that could have been other than this. So I tried to do damage control the best I could.
Thank you. Commissioner Plord?
I have a question for Mrs. Stakowitz. Are we, as a city, going to benefit from this at all, or is the information going to help us in any way at all?
I think there's, even despite it's presented as a challenge in kind of a negative manner, there's a good thing that comes out of this is we will learn how to multi-jurisdictionally coordinate stream levels. Right? Can always turn it into some kind of tactical positive response.
My father, bless his soul, used to say all of my life, something small is better than nothing at all. Now I know. I think I know why he said that. Thank you.
Commissioner Cambenzi?
Just a quick question. It says that this agreement has to be renewed every 5 years. I understand that the city agreed to pay for this part of the project, but are we now tied to monitoring this because we agreed to change it,
We will be responsible for monitoring.
even though it's a federal, considered part of the federal highway or state's jurisdiction?
Yeah, we will be responsible for monitoring the stream because it is our stormwater, the stormwater coming from other parts of the city into it, channeling it out. So,
If
yes.
I guess if the federal highway department determined that they wanted to put a roundabout there, would they be able to put that responsibility on us? Or is this simply because we agreed to take this part of the project?
No, and it's not just the roundabout. There could have been other things done at that intersection where we would have needed to address the hydrology in the area. It's a pretty unique situation in that we have what used to be a stream in a pipe that's now been daylighted. And that was part of what played into this as well, because our staff knew that we had, thousands upon thousands of dollars, $50,000 to $100,000 invested in daylighting a stream, and there's natural fish coming back to it, and so on and so forth. And we know this on the ground. And then MDOT Hydraulics wants to channelize it and put it in a pipe or something else, and that trying to create that unique balance is ultimately what caused this. I mean, we could have put it in a concrete culvert pipe and buried it back underground, but that's not what City Marquette does, at least per our plans and guidance that we follow.
I agree wholeheartedly with the monitoring. I guess it's still a thorn in my side that, we chose to kind of bond our full faith and credit for, a highway system that really has no city jurisdiction. Whether or not this would have still fallen on us, I guess that's where I stand, and that's why I'll be voting no on it.
I can help you with one thing there that perhaps I wasn't clear, but overall maintenance of the highway system, the MDOT will be responsible for that. If there's potholes, they're going to have to fix it, so on and so forth. But this particular issue, this stream gauge, is going to be ours from now until perpetuity, right?
Thank you. Commissioner Frazier, you had something?
Yeah, you could sell fishing permits to people that could fish in the area, and then you could they could go towards the cost. Any way to make money for the city. Sell fishing permits to fish in this great river, and then you could use those permits to go towards the payment of your little sensor you have working on. I think either that or hire a professional swimmer to swim it once in a while. That might work.
Duly noted.
Okay, thank you.
Question?
Call the question. Okay, we're going to vote on this. All those in favor, please say yes.
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 Opposed?
No.
That carries 6-1. Next, we move to our second new business item of the evening, fiscal year 2017, capital improvement and refunding bonds authorizing resolution. City Clerk, background please.
Thank you, sir. In order to continue the process of issuing capital improvement bonds for fiscal year 2017 projects, a resolution must be approved that will authorize the sale of the bonds. A notice of intent resolution was approved on May 30th, 2017. Projects proposed to be financed with this bond issue are attached. These are projects that have been budgeted, and they include a Brownfield Authority project that will be paid by Brownfield TIF capture. In addition, bonds issued for fiscal year 2009 projects can be refunded. Under current market conditions, potential savings in future debt service could be approximately $173,000 for the remaining life of the bonds. This refunding will be executed only if market conditions prove to be favorable at the time of closing. Fiscal effect: debt service schedules will be produced upon closing, currently scheduled for August 23rd, 2017. Recommendation: approve a resolution to authorize fiscal year 2017 capital improvement and refunding bonds and authorize the city clerk to sign the resolution. Alternatives as determined by the commission.
Thank you. Do we have a motion for this? Commissioner Plort.
I move that we approve a resolution to authorize fiscal year 2017 capital improvement and refunding bonds and authorize the city clerk to sign the resolution.
Do we have a second? Commissioner Frazier.
Second.
Discussion? Any? Commissioner Plort?
Just to say that it is part of the process, and we needed to sell the bonds.
Commissioner Frazier, anything? Commissioner Cambenzi?
I want to thank staff particularly for the possibility to refund some of our bonds from 2009. That's great news. There are a lot of great projects on here. I will be voting yes on it, but if I could let the record show that I'm not in support of the Presque Isle Fair Avenue roundabout, the Nordic Bay Utilities, or the Baraga Avenue extension due to my, continual votes with the hospital project.
Thank you. Commissioner Baldini.
I think maybe I'd like to ask Gary some questions on this.
Sure.
This is to preface this is a big chunk of money for us this year. We usually don't bond this. Gary's feeling largesse maybe or something, $11 million bucks. But, and I think, Gary, what would be appropriate so that the public understands is that part of this is a refunding, which is great because you're getting a better rate of return. And secondly, some of this is going to be with money that we've already designated, like the roundabouts for Wright Street come from the Lundin money. And so, and when we get to the budget cycle, we want to make sure that that money's locked in. But maybe you could break this down for us, Gary, so it's on the record publicly.
Sure, I'll try to give it my best shot. And by the way, the Baraga Avenue extension is part of the Founders Landing project. It's not part of the hospital, so I just wanted to put that out there. And that's been on the books for several years now. But $11 million is on the high side. We know we're not going to be issuing $11 million of bonds. I was kind of playing around with some of the numbers earlier today, and it looks like with bond issuance cost, and depending on how the Johnson Controls project goes, that's kind of the one remaining cliffhanger that we have. But it could be let's say a $10.3 million bond. We have roughly $2.5 million that's from Lundin Mining, so we don't count that towards what we would normally bond for. And then we have the $900,000 for Baraga Avenue, which will be paid for by the Brownfield TIF. So technically, a normal city bond, that would bring that down to about $6.9 million. And maybe to make it a little bit easier to swallow, maybe so, maybe not, but going back to 2014, then 15, 16, and 17, we currently have a policy that says we won't issue more debt than we retire in a year. Well, going back to 2014, we're actually issuing less than that amount. So if you go back to 2014 through 17, the debt that we paid off was $18.2 million. If you go back that same time period and include this roughly $10.3 million, subtracting the 3.4 to give you 6.9 million for this year, going back to 2014, we would have issued $15.5 million worth of bonds. So if you average it out, we're still, $2.7 million under the policy. I know if you look at it on a straight year-to-year basis, it kind of goes against the policy that we had set. But if you just look back at the past 4 years and average it out, we're still in good shape. I don't know if that answered your question or not.
Thank you. I thank you for the rationalization of keeping us at $4.5 million. Okay, but Gary, one quick question: the possible JCI projects. I thought we were going to cover all of the projects under bank financing, and here you have these three as bond proposals.
Correct. That's like I said, that's pending if the JCI contract is approved.
Okay.
If it is approved, it looks like out of this year's, what we call the projects to bond, that's $475,000. So I did not include that total in the $10.3 million figure that I tossed out. So if we don't, if later the JCI contract is not approved, and these are projects that we still want to do, we'll have to add $475,000 to that bond.
Thank you, thank you.
Any other discussion? Comments? Any? Thank you, Gary. Okay, it being a resolution, we're going to need a roll call vote. City Clerk?
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Cambenzi,
Yes.
Commissioner Conley,
Yes.
Commissioner Frazier,
Yes.
Commissioner Plord,
Yes.
Commissioner Reynolds,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baldini,
Yes.
and Mayor Campana.
Yes. Carries 7-0. Next new business item. It's a Special Assessment District, DLP Marquette General Hospital, LLC. City Clerk?
Thank you, sir. On December 17th, 2015, a post-closing development agreement was entered into between the city and DLP Marquette General Hospital, LLC, as an added protection to the city for the collection of revenues to pay the debt service for the Brownfield Authority bonds issued for this project. It provides for an agreement establishing a special assessment district to be placed on the new DLP property. Following a period of negotiations, city staff and DLP have reached an agreement on the terms of the special assessment district as set forth in the attached special assessment agreement. Fiscal effect: this special assessment district will add a layer of protection to help guarantee that sufficient revenues will be available to pay debt service on the bonds issued for this project. Recommendation: approve the special assessment agreement establishing a special assessment district on the property owned by DLP Marquette General Hospital, LLC for the relocation of the new hospital project. Alternatives as determined by the commission.
Thank you. Do we have a motion? Commissioner Plord?
I move that we approve the special assessment agreement establishing a special assessment district on the property owned by DLP Marquette General, LLC for the relocation of the new hospital project.
Do we have a second? Commissioner Frazier?
Support.
Got any comments? Commissioner Plord?
Well, it does add another layer of security for us, for the city, to make sure that we can recover for expenses that we've made, and I think it's a level of security that we need.
Commissioner Frazier, anything?
No comment.
Comments anywhere else? Commissioner Cambenzi?
I have a few questions for staff. So it says that we won't get repaid more than 20 million for all the projects.
The 20 million covers the service center and some of the environmental work. The street portion was not going to be, it worked out the hospital wasn't going to be accountable for the street work portion of that, but the service center and the environmental work is what they were being tapped to secure.
Just to further that, so this only covers the service center, but we're still bonding for, I don't know what it's up to, 13 million for the.
It's probably going to be closer to 30 million, I think, which is the service center, and it won't be covering the road portion of that. So.
Okay, and none of the interest on any of this, right? It's just the principal.
Well, it's principal and interest. It's 20 million of principal is what it is.
Okay. So do we have an estimate of, I guess, where that would leave the taxpayers if this happened today with paying off that interest of what's left? If it's,
Well, the hospital would be, on the hook for the full $20 million plus interest. And then potentially, I guess the city could have $10 million of liability for that.
I guess one question to our city manager, is there any way that this could be renegotiated to pay the full amount back to the city?
I can answer that. I mean, this was negotiated, not last year, I think maybe the year before. This has already been done. This $20 million limit was in many documents before this one. All this document does is add that extra security, and it basically says what the post-closing development agreement provides, and that's for the special assessment district. So we're just doing that, but the $20 million limitation, that was negotiated and established, in the early documents.
Commissioner Baldini.
I don't have the document in front of me, but the document that I wasn't here when you negotiated, that with the hospital says, if they decide to pick up and leave, they're still liable.
Correct.
And they have to pay us, and whatever they have to pay there. Yeah, and even if they decide to sell it to a nonprofit, they still have the liability.
Correct. We
Okay.
put in all of the various agreements, we put as many hooks as we could. This was actually one suggested by our Miller Canfield attorneys. Again, the challenge that we put to them was, what else can we do to make this, to protect the city as much as possible? And this was the one avenue that they suggested that we do put in place. So it's, like we said, it's just an added layer of protection for the city.
Any other comments? Commissioner Cambenzi again.
I'd like to thank the city and city staff for putting this in place. I'm just going to follow my vote that, the original agreement we signed, it wasn't 50-50. For what we've put in as a city, I just don't feel like we're getting that back, but I would like to thank staff for bringing this forward.
Seeing no further comments, all those in favor of this, please say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Opposed?
No.
That carries 6-1. We come to our next new business item, which is Energy Savings Improvement Program Project, the financing. City Clerk.
Thank you,
Becker.
sir. At the January 30th, 2017 meeting, the City Commission confirmed Johnson Controls, Inc., JCI, as the selected vendor for a citywide energy-based performance contract solution. A project development agreement was approved at the February 13th, 2017 City Commission meeting. This approval directed JCI to begin a detailed engineering and energy analysis to develop a scope of work that includes guaranteed total project costs and guaranteed project savings. Once the engineered solution is presented and, if approved, a final performance contracting agreement will be negotiated and presented to the City Commission at the second regular meeting in July for consideration. Should the Energy Savings Improvement Program project be approved, it will be financed through the Tax-Exempt Lease Purchase, TELP, program. TELP is a new program in the state of Michigan and is also known as a municipal lease, a tax-exempt lease purchase agreement that presumes the city will assume ownership of the assets when the lease term expires. This will not count toward the city's overall debt. In order to facilitate timing and to take advantage of a low interest rate environment, bids have been solicited for the TELP financing. Should the project not be approved, the city is not committed to utilize this financing. While details of the project have yet to be approved, the bids were solicited on a not-to-exceed amount of $23,500,000. The final amount of the financing will be adjusted to the actual project if approved. Attached is a summary of the bids received. Fiscal effect. The goal of the project is to identify and fund infrastructure upgrades to city facilities and utilities with an emphasis on energy reduction. It is anticipated that these upgrades will be self-financed through the energy savings generated. Recommendation: approve Bank of America as the preferred financing partner for the tax-exempt lease purchase of the Energy Savings Improvement Program project and authorize the CFO to sign the term sheet. It is understood that this acceptance of the financing is contingent upon approval of the overall project. alternatives as determined by the commission.
Thank you. Mr. Lutenberger, I believe you wanted to speak to this. 3 minutes.
Thank you. Matt Lutenberger, 1406 Garfield Ave here in Marquette. I come before you because I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. I really don't, because there's a lot of projects that I feel passionate about. There's a lot of projects that I'm just one voice. There's also a lot of projects that, in the long run, I don't really see as more beneficial than a normal everyday turnover of equipment and materials. So in some way, I stand before you not to oppose the financing agreement. I stand in front to ask, do we have to go 20 years? Because if the concentration is for energy efficiency, honestly, I'm going to try to relay this in a little bit, but I would like to see the city of Marquette to actually say, Paris Accord be damned, we're going to create as much electricity off of free energy as we can. And we're just going to allow people to have it and not even question how much we charge them for it. That's what I would like to see the city of Marquette in 10 years do. And that's what I'm kind of annoyed that you didn't take in the Paris Accord more seriously for this reason. This is a job that we can give Johnson Controls, a major overhaul of our city, a mandate to say we want to be energy neutral. We want to be to the point where this building itself has been hit with the solar panels or sunshine all day long. Those kinds of finances for this project are going to be part of the $1 million or $1.5 million a year parts of your project. My statement to you on this is that $1.5 million a year you're voting to give to somebody else based on your own tax savings is not going to the Board of Light and Power, your actual electricity provider. You as a customer, as the largest consumer, you're proving this right now. You use $20 million or $1.5 million worth of electricity every year. Now, don't get me wrong. If it means better flow rates on your toilets, great. Let's do some of these projects. But that seems like a simple turnover rate bond. Something like this seems like a mandate from us as consumers, as customers, and as citizens. If I'm just one person, as a citizen, I would like to see our city be very, very visionary and say, we want to have more electricity than we ever need to know. Right now, we've got 2 power plants fully operational for the entire city, which means we have double the amount of electricity, and you're looking to reduce your cost, which will push that cost onto us because this Board of Light and Power was banking on your $1 million a year. They came to you and suggested a rate increase knowing that you were going to be paying more, and this is what you get to say. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, do we have a motion? Motion. I'm looking for a motion. Commissioner Conley.
I move that we approve the Bank of America as the preferred financing partner for the tax-exempt lease purchase of the Energy Savings Improvement Program project and authorize the CFO to sign the term sheet. It is understood that this acceptance of the financing is contingent upon approval of the overall project.
Second, Commissioner Baldini.
Support.
Comments, any? Commissioner Conley?
None.
I have a comment that this does not bind us to this project, okay? But what this does do is it locks us into first, maybe Gary or the city manager, were the local banks asked to participate in this? I mean, I know this is a big project and they would have to bid it out, but Wells Fargo is pretty big.
Yeah, I don't know if they were contacted individually, but it was a nationwide search, so it was put out nationwide. I mean, we had banks from Texas and places like that show interest in it. So.
Commissioner Ken Benzie.
A question for Gary. Are you are you afraid that we should lock in this rate now and not wait another month?
Yeah, this is a very good rate. I'm quite impressed with it. The reason we rushed to do it, the feds were going to start increasing interest rates, and we're just going to see if we could get away with it, because we closed the bids like an hour before the feds were going to announce their next rate increase, and it actually worked to our advantage. So if we're going to do the project, you know, this is the rate that is very good for us. So.
Thank you. Commissioner Reynolds? No?
That was my question.
Commissioner Cambenzi?
Well, I'm willing to vote yes on this to get a cheaper rate for the contract if it gets approved. But right now, you know, I'm still a no vote on the JCI approval. Because I feel like we don't know what the projects are. We haven't determined if the city can do it cheaper through our own energy savings by doing the bigger projects first, and then, you know, looking forward and paying it off that way at a much less cost. I think one of the projects that, you know, I've heard over and over again are, you know, can we work together more with the Board of Light and Power on our street lights? And I guess I'd like to have these conversations before we vote on this JCI approval to see how much money we can save on our own. And I've heard this from several people in the community. I know we can get a lot done through this. I guess my worry is still that, are these the right projects for us to do, or can we, with the city staff we have, you know, kind of manage what comes first and use those savings. So I'm willing to vote for this, but right now I am a no vote on the overall JCI agreement.
Anyone else? Okay. Question. All those in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Opposed? That passes 7-0. We come to our last new business item of the evening, which is the purchase of property from John Bleckner. The amendment. City Clerk?
Thank you, sir. As a result of the preferred alternative being chosen for the proposed transportation system improvements related to the relocation of the former Marquette General Hospital, MGH, various properties, or portions thereof, were identified as needing to be acquired for the project. At its meeting on June 12, 2017, the City Commission approved a purchase agreement with John Bleckner for the purchase of portions of his property at both 525 and 545 Fisher Street. In order to accommodate a partial mortgage discharge for the release of the portions of property the city is purchasing, the property owner determined a mortgage refinance was in the best interest of both parties. The property owner would like to request the city cover the closing costs for his refinance, and the city attorney has prepared the attached amendment to the purchase agreement for commission approval. Fiscal effect: costs specific to closing on the property owner's mortgage refinance will be $6,469.72, which payment will be made and funded through the Brownfield Plan for the DLP Marquette General Replacement Hospital. This plan was approved by the Marquette City Commission on October 27, 2014. Recommendation: approve the amended purchase agreement to provide for payment by the city of closing costs related to the refinancing of mortgages on the property owned by John Bleckner at 525 and 545 Fisher Street. Alternatives as determined by the commission.
Thank you. Commissioners, do we have a motion for this? Commissioner Conley.
I move that we approve the amended purchase agreement to provide for payment by the city of closing costs related to the refinancing of mortgages on the property owned by John Bleckner at 525 and 545 Fisher Street.
Do we have a second? Commissioner Frazier?
Second.
Any comments, Commissioner Conley?
This is part of a reasonable deal that we're making with this owner who's been reasonable with us.
None. Commissioner Cambenzi?
Well, just with consistency, I will be voting no on this. you know, with everything we're doing through the brownfield plan, it's not just this fee you see on the paper. I mean, there is interest to the entire amount that we're bonding for. I understand it's part of what we have to do going forward. The majority voted for this. To be consistent with my overall vote, I will be voting no.
Any other comments? We don't have to do a roll call, but let's.
We just need 5 votes.
Right.
You don't have to, you can always do a roll call if that's what you want.
Okay. Let's just voice vote. All those in favor of this, please say yes.
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 Opposed?
No.
That passes 6-1. Next, we come to our second public comment of the evening. Again, a chance for citizens to address the commission. You have 3 minutes. Give us name, address, city or township. Does anybody wish? I'm going to open public comment. Anybody wish to address us?
Frank Chavarito, these are my opinions. First names are still regularly used. Mr. Campana, who's often accused of not handling participants equally, is asked again if first names are acceptable. Apparently they are, and if not, why he administers according to who's who. He gave a man 30 extra seconds tonight. May 30th, Ms. Compensi said a lack of communication from the hospital causes outward migration. A week later, local workers protested when an out-of-state crew arrived. June 12th, she supported our local workers and refuted claims that qualified help was not available here when it almost surely was. Who can we trust? May 30th, a resident said no map was provided for the Fair and Wilson Street upgrades. We're simply not being heard up here when the same issues recur and no action is taken. You people don't even listen to yourselves, so why bother running for a city board? For example, Ms. Compensi raised her hand to comment before a May 30th vote but was not recognized. The fault lies with the chair who failed to check, as well as his peer for not making herself noticed. Keep your hands down unless there's something to say, or else make yourselves heard. Another example, 2 meetings in a row, you took properties from their owners on bogus recommendations. The first when the appraisal was done solely from outside the home, and May 30th without the owner in attendance. The manager wasn't even sure if he'd been notified. Mr. Keefe said the owner had seemed agreeable. Ms. Reynolds asked why we couldn't wait 2 weeks only to receive an evasive response. She said it's still too quick and wasn't planned well enough, and with Ms. Compensi voted against the motion. Like the Trollerhoff item, no reason for the rush made sense when challenged. Mr. Pelord feared costs would increase if we waited. 2 weeks? Mr. Angeli said they'd approved the process with the contractor ahead of time, so reminiscent of the South Beach destruction. June 12th, Mr. Baldini presented well-meaning environmental initiatives. He wants this board recognized as a leader, not that we agree on the deservingness despite the Energy Center. Let us wait until the facility is paid off before drawing our conclusions for reasons on record. Then there's this board's compromise of our wooded environment and the fear of what's ahead. May 30th, Mr. Fraser mentioned that someone cut a tree for a clear picture of the lake. How ironic to illegally cut away beauty for a beautiful photo. He saw no reason why they couldn't get a better view and said the South Beach cutting saved the city money. This cannot be true when we wasted $4,500 to leave us with less than what we had. Mr. Campana said people were using the area as their private toilets and homeless people were sleeping there. He's oblivious to the fact that these people will just go to the next closest area, then the next, and the next. This suggests we're supposed to follow them around with chainsaws until no natural terrain exists. That mentality is unsustainable. How many times have you heard said that destroying the resource is not the answer? It sure isn't environmentally conscious.
Anyone else?
Sorry, wanted to finish that note. Hi, Matt Lutenberger, 1406 Garfield Ave here in Marquette, Michigan. I'm going to flash back a whole month because it's been that long since I've come up here to speak before. And a month ago, I suggested, this was before recent events and the Paris Accord and all these other things. A month ago, I suggested ways that we could save money or create electricity or put our high school kids to work and give them something to to get an engineering degree or something to that effect. And here's a project for them to work on. And at the time afterwards, Mr. Fraser, you pointed out that you would hope that I'd find a business or a company that I can start and help with that. Well, since that time, your Board of Light and Power has lost their number one and their preferred number one replacement. They've also lost their number three. So at some point, I bring to you every 3 minutes, every other month, or every other week, this passion for how do I create electricity in the city of Marquette, for the city of Marquette, by the city of Marquette, with the city of Marquette's help. And I don't mean you as a council and the city of Marquette. I just mean us as a community. We have a Board of Light and Power. It is empowered to create the best electricity at the cheapest rates for the city of Marquette. Here's a moment that I come to you not as a citizen or as a potential I guess, leader in this community. I come to you as a citizen, and how many citizens will it take to say to the Board of Light and Power, especially at this time where there is no leadership, there is at least a Board of Light and Power that is also, or a public elected officialing body that is looking into which way to move forward best. And I see it as, just like you've suggested, the more citizens who come up here and tell you that they don't like an idea that you're going to do, the more you're likely to listen to that. So I present to you this possibility that you call up your former mayors, your former commission friends, and whomever are on the city commission, and tell them to read the letter I sent them. I'm trying to create an environment 10 years from now that we don't have to have this discussion about conservation of energy. This is something that today there are people who are working to create electricity in areas that have no power plants, no natural gas lines, and no coal, but they're doing it, and they're creating enough to power villages. There are places in this world that have a lot less natural energy than we do, and they are on the forefront of this new technology, of this new industry. We as a city of Marquette keep talking about finding a new industry, finding a new way to provide jobs. This is one of them, and you are at a crucial time that you have the ability to influence your Board of Light and Power. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone else? Seeing none, we're going to close public comment. We're going to move to comments from the commission. We are going to start with Commissioner Reynolds.
Well, I'm not going to add any further comments this evening. I'm already losing my voice from being ill, but it was a good meeting.
Thank you. Commissioner Plord.
I thought it was a good meeting as well. I want to thank Mr. Lutenberger for pointing out that there is a commercial interest in the dark sky project, and I can assure you we are working with with the group to try to come up with a dark sky solution, which I think personally is a good idea. I'd like to see that myself. Also want to thank Mr. Swadley and Mr. Curran for coming up, and Mr. Lankinen for coming up and talking about some of the issues that we dealt with today. I want to thank Mr. Verito for pointing out to us once again that he has absolutely very little talent with numbers. He criticized us as a board for not doing something 9 years ago, 8 years ago, 7 years ago, but we've only been sitting on this board for 6 months. So I can do the math for him if he likes. He can see me after the meeting, and I'll be happy to do that. Not sure why he bothers during public comment, but it's interesting to listen to that point. I also want to commend the city doing the work that they're doing. The fire department is doing great work, and Chief, I want to commend you and your group for paying attention to these ordinances, bringing them into our attention. We may not have completely agreed tonight with how things were presented to us, but it's very important that you do that and you continue to do that. Gary Simpson, also want to commend you and your group for the way you monitor the bond situation with the city of Marquette. I'm very impressed with that. And as Commissioner Kimbenzi mentioned, you do find ways whenever you can to return money or keep money down low, that we're spending as low as possible, and our liabilities as low as possible. One more comment for Mr. Verito. 2 weeks, yes, 2 weeks are important. Prices go up daily, they go up by the hour. And that's why it's so important that Mr. Simpson and his section monitor all the finances and everything that we do, because things go up all the time. Is it important that we capture the best prices whenever we can? Absolutely. I, for one, speaking for myself, want to save the taxpayers as much money as I possibly can and still keep the city moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Conley?
The community calendar, Marquette365.com, is up and running. It's getting better every day. Take a look at it. You'll find out some of the stuff that's going on in the city. And one of my favorite events is Art Week, which is this week, and it gets better as the week goes on. There's Art Stroll on Thursday from 5 to, I don't know, probably 8, where you can walk around downtown. There are artists that are associated with, have been sponsored by businesses. There'll be live music on the street. There'll be a lot of food trucks there. And last year it was really good. It's going to be even better this year. So Thursday night, starting at 5, Art Week. And you can check out the schedule for the events for Art Week on Marquette365.com. On Friday, then there's I'm going to say it wrong, Plein Air painting festival. Artists come in and paint. And then Friday night, Peter Yarrow of Peter, Paul, and Mary. And if you don't know the name, then you're not as old as I am. But that's it's really kind of an exciting week, and I would encourage everybody to come out for Art Week. I think the weather has been guaranteed. Thank you.
Commissioner Cambenzi?
Well, I just wanted to thank our Fire Chief Ian Davis for bringing the 2 ordinances forward. And certainly, just to relay that by tabling it, it will hopefully just bring a little more clarity. You have my full support as a fire department, certainly as the chief. Safety is very important, and I think we're going to get to a resolution on what we do with it. The ideal situation is to have, the right water and sewer and pipes going out to these properties. And I think it does bring up the caution not to put the cart before the horse. And so we do have 2 properties now that don't have the correct water flow. We do have the Carp River there. However, I understand that what you're doing in the department is simply to make sure that we're, following the state life safety code. So I think we'll get there. And other than that, I just hope everyone has a safe 4th of July. That is all.
Commissioner Frazier?
Speaking of the 4th of July, Sarah Kamenzi, Commissioner Baldini has guaranteed us a great 4th of July. The weather will be perfect and it's going to be great. That's what he told me, at least. He's saying great 4th of July no matter what. So that's what he's guaranteeing anyway. Who knows if it's going to happen, but the weather forecast says it should be good. Also, speaking of the 365 calendar, I saw advertised a superhero run by the youth theater. I thought maybe our mayor could participate. He's a super mayor, so he could be against the other mayors and maybe dress up like a superhero, just like yourself then, Dave. But, as far as comments on McCurry's Cove, I've been there several times. I saw the fences. People have asked me before, and I said, well, they made us stay up for a while just to protect, that's all cliffs. We've had problems at Black Rocks with Ian's people having to go out there and rescue people, so maybe just to prevent injury and also protect the lighthouse property, because the Maritime Museum runs the lighthouse and just protect people from going on the property. So who knows what will happen. And that, have a good holiday, maybe.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Baldini.
Thank you, Your Honor. Earlier this evening, we had a work session to review the audit, and just in case anyone is interested, the audits, we're in very good shape financially, and I want to thank the staff for the work they've done for that. It's if anyone wants it, I think there's a copy in the library and the city manager's office. But it was very good, and thank him. Secondly, Commissioner Conley has already covered Art Week, and it is a lot of activities this week for Art Week. Matter of fact, one of the displays is downtown next to the little park at Zephyr's Bar, the umbrellas. that the DDA put up with, I think, a contribution from VAST. And it really is a neat little thing, a little project, and it's what sort of makes Marquette Marquette. Then also the 4th of July. Yes, the 4th of July is coming, and we call it the greatest 4th in the North, but it really is quite impressive, the number of people that volunteer. The Exchange Club does the activities. They start this Thursday night, setting up the tents. They'll open Sunday at noon. You then have the parade with the Kiwanis. We have the Rotary doing 50-50. We have a number of volunteers and people who have helped raise money for the fireworks, where if the weather is fine, they will go off that evening. And it's always amazed me, the number of people who participate to make this event happen. And as you know, it always just sort of blows my mind when you go downtown in the morning of the 4th. It could be 6 o'clock and people already have their chairs lined up on the street to stake their claim for where they're going to watch this parade. So it's a great time for the community in terms of reunion, family reunions, class reunions, and just a lot of good music in the park and food. So thank you.
Thank you. In regards to the 4th, of course, that's always a big event in Marquette. I'm sure hopefully the weather will cooperate. We haven't had that lately, but plan on coming to Marquette. There's a lot going on. In regards to the fireworks, I mentioned this to Commissioner Baldini earlier. I have not been approached to buy a ticket. In the past, they used to buy tickets to support. I don't know if they're selling them or not. Real quick, are they?
We always accept money, but the Rotary Club is going to go to the streets, I think, starting this week for their 50. They're in charge of that.
Yeah, I would encourage people to dip into their wallets because, we just need community support. Doesn't take much, 5, 10, 20. It's important that we have these fireworks. In regards to the fire code, I hope that we do get this properly worded, coded, sooner rather than later. We can't be without this uneven wording. So hopefully Ian will get this taken care of soon. We also had a work session tonight, very intense work session, on garbage pickup and recycling. We're in the process of letting out contracts for a new pickup company. We may go with the new one. We may stay with our present one. We may go to get rid of the bag system and go to the plastic bin system. There's a lot of questions about which is better, which is cheaper, which the customer, what the resident of the city prefers. I would encourage you to speak to the commissioners. Give us your views on which. We'll try to explain it to you. We're still trying to figure it out, but there could be a change coming. It's not going to be a great price change, but it's going to be a big how we collect garbage and how we recycle within the city. Very important. City Manager.
Thank you for attending all those work sessions today. I really do appreciate your continued efforts. If you think June was busy, July might be a little bit busier, but yeah. And just to remind the commission that I will be absent from the next commission meeting on the 10th. Gary will be acting in my place, so if you want to get anything done in a hurry, you can do that while he's here. Otherwise, might take a while. So other than that, I have nothing else.
We are adjourned.